It was just after midday on New Year's Day, and the police told me I couldn't go inside my own father's cabin. They said someone had been attacked. They said it like they were reading the weather. Before I tell you the rest, do me a favor. If you like true-to-life stories where people get exactly what they earned, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves a little justice served cold. It helps the channel more than you'd think. And when the first big betrayal hits, I'm going to ask you to leave a comment. Because if you've ever had somebody rewrite your family history like it was their little hobby, you're not alone. Let me take you back. My name is Lauren Bishop. I'm 36. I live downstate now, outside Grand Rapids, but every New Year's we drive up north to Torch Lake. Same cabin, same ritual. Same stupid family photo on the porch steps that my dad insisted we take, even when he started needing a cane. Dad was Richard Bishop. He died in March of 2025. Stroke. Fast. Quiet. The kind that steals your words and leaves everyone else scrambling to fill the silence. He was moderately wealthy. Not private jet wealthy. More like, built a successful construction supply company, owned a couple rentals, had a lake cabin, and always seemed to know a guy at the bank. That kind of wealthy. After the funeral, my mom said we were still doing the cabin. He'd haunt us if we didn't, she said. And she didn't say it like a joke. My mother is not a woman you bet against. So on New Year's Eve, we drove north through that slate-gray Michigan winter. Bare trees. Frozen fields. The sky low like it was pressing on the windshield. We got in around midnight, unloaded enough to survive, and went to sleep with the lake out back looking like black glass. New Year's morning was the usual. Coffee that tasted like nostalgia. My mom, Diane, already up and dressed like she was hosting a magazine shoot. She's 69 and somehow gets more put together when she's annoyed. My brother Mark showed up with his wife, Jenna, and their 2 kids. Mark's 41. Big shoulders. Big laugh. The kind of guy who could carry a couch by himself and still stop to hold a door for a stranger. Then there was my younger brother Evan. 33. The baby. Still acts like he should be exempt from responsibility because he once got a participation trophy for soccer. We were all a little tender. Not in the sweet way. In the way where grief sits in the corner and watches you pretend to be normal. Around mid-morning, Mom said, "We're going to do what your father loved. We're going to get outside. We're going to breathe. And we're going to come back here and eat like people who haven't been abandoned by time." We unpacked the rest around noon. Bags. Groceries. Kids' winter boots everywhere like tiny landmines. Mark teased Evan for bringing protein powder to a cabin weekend. Evan said he was on a program. Mark said, "Yeah, a program for being single forever." By 1, we decided on a hike at Grass River Natural Area. It's close enough to be realistic. Trails. Boardwalk sections. Pines that still smell alive in winter. And if you walk far enough, you can get a view over the wetland that makes you feel like the world is bigger than your problems. We layered up. Hats. Gloves. The kids complained. Evan complained louder. Mom shushed everyone with one look. I swear my mother could stop a bar fight without raising her voice. The drive over was normal. Music low. Mark pointing out the same turn he pointed out every year. This is where Dad nearly hit that deer. This is where Dad got pulled over and talked his way out of a ticket. It was like he was keeping Dad alive by telling the stories. The hike started nice. Cold air in your lungs, the crunch of snow. The kids running ahead and then running back because they were terrified of being left behind. Mark walked beside Mom, shoulder to shoulder, like he was her security detail. About 15 minutes in, my mom said something that stuck to my ribs. She said, "Your father always liked it up here because nobody could reach him." I laughed. A quick little breath. No emails. No phone calls. Just him and his trees. Mom didn't laugh. She just nodded like she'd said something bigger than the words. We made it out to a spot where the trail opens and you can see the river winding through the reeds. The sky was bright in that winter way. Everything sharp. The kids threw little chunks of snow into the water. Mark took a picture of Mom when she wasn't looking, then showed it to her like a proud kid. She actually smiled. If the story ended there, it would be a nice little family moment. But it didn't. Not even close. On the walk back, Evan realized he'd lost his phone. He slapped his pockets like the phone might teleport into existence if he panicked hard enough. Don't tell me you brought it and lost it, Mark said. I didn't lose it. I probably left it on the kitchen counter, Evan said, like that was somehow better. Mark stopped walking. He turned around. You want it? I'll go back to the cabin and grab it. We're only 30 minutes out. Evan waved him off. Nah, it's fine. Mark looked at Mom. Mom looked at Evan. That was all it took. Mark sighed the way a man sighs when he's already decided he's going to do the responsible thing and hate himself for it. I'll run back, Mark said. You all keep going. Start heating up the soup. I'll be right behind you. Jenna said, Are you sure? Mark winked. I'm a mountain man. We watched him turn down the trail and disappear between the pines. And I remember thinking, he looks like Dad right now. Same stride, same confidence, same belief that home is safe. At the time, I thought the worst thing that could happen was that Mark would come back annoyed and we'd tease Evan for being careless. I was wrong. We got back to the cabin around 4. The sun was already sinking. Michigan winter doesn't do slow sunsets. It just shuts the lights off. We could smell dinner before we even opened the door. Mom had chili going in the slow cooker. Cornbread in the oven. The cabin smelled like comfort and old wood and the faint lemon cleaner my dad always insisted on using. Evan checked the counter. No phone. He frowned like the counter had personally betrayed him. He'll find it, I said. We waited. 10 minutes. 15. 30. No Mark. Jenna tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. Maybe no service on the trail, Evan said. Mom didn't answer. She just looked out the back window at the darkening lake like she could read the surface for information. Then we heard it. Tires on gravel. Not one car. Several. Fast. Heavy. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees and turned the cabin walls into a strobe. Jenna dropped the spoon she was holding. It clattered into the sink. I opened the front door before Mom could stop me. Cold air punched me in the face. 2 patrol SUVs. A state trooper. An ambulance tucked behind them like a shadow. A deputy stepped forward, palm up. Ma'am. Stay back. We need everyone to remain outside. This is our cabin, I said. My voice sounded thin. He didn't care. There's been an incident. Where's my son? Mom said, pushing past me. She didn't raise her voice, but it carried. Where is Mark Bishop? The deputy hesitated. That pause told me everything before he said a word. He's being treated, the deputy said. He's alive. But you can't go in there. Not yet. Jenna made a sound like she'd been hit in the stomach. Evan went pale and said, What the hell happened? The deputy looked at us like he'd already had the worst day and didn't need ours on top of it. Someone was attacked inside the residence. We're securing the scene. We'll take statements. For now, you all need to stay right here. Mom didn't cry. She didn't scream. She walked down the porch steps and stood on the gravel, shoulders back, eyes locked on the cabin door like she could force it open with willpower. A trooper approached her. Ma'am, are you Richard Bishop's widow? Mom's jaw tightened. Yes. The trooper nodded once, then said the sentence that cracked the day in half. Another woman inside says she is also his widow. I swear the air changed. Like even the lake went still to listen. Mom took a slow breath. That's impossible. The trooper's face didn't move. Ma'am, she has identification. She has documents. We're sorting it out. Evan barked a laugh that sounded more like panic. Documents for what? A hobby? Looking back now, I know the truth. He didn't legally have 2 wives, he had one. My mom. He had simply built a second life out of thin air by telling a series of coordinated lies to his lawyers, to Tessa, and to us. But standing on that gravel in the dark, I didn't know any of that. All I had was the sound of my mother's name being used by a stranger. Jenna grabbed my arm. Her fingers were ice. Where is Mark? A paramedic stepped out of the ambulance. Family of Mark Bishop? Jenna stumbled forward. Me. I'm his wife. The paramedic lowered his voice. He's stable, but he's got a broken jaw and a broken arm. He's headed to Munson. We think his arm might need surgery. He took a hard hit. Jenna made a small noise and then her knees buckled. I caught her before she hit the gravel. Mom's eyes didn't water. They hardened. Who did that to him? That's when the deputy said, We have multiple parties inside. Conflicting statements. We need yours. Here's the part where I ask you to comment like I promised. Because if you're listening and thinking, no way this is real, I need you to tell me. Have you ever been blindsided by a lie so big it felt like a movie? Drop a comment. Even if it's just, I'd burn the cabin down. I won't judge. They separated us on the driveway like we were suspects instead of family. Mom sat on the porch steps, back straight, hands folded, like she was waiting to be called into court. I told the deputy exactly what happened. The hike, Mark turning back for Evan's phone. The cabin being empty when we left it this morning. He asked about weapons. We said no. He asked about arguments with neighbors. We said no. He asked if my father had enemies. Mom said only the kind he created by being better than them. The deputy's eyebrows lifted. Even he appreciated a good burn. Then he asked the question that made my skin crawl. Did you know your father had another family? Evan said no. That's insane. Mom said nothing. She stared at the cabin door, like she was trying to remember every year she'd stood at that door, welcoming us in, believing it belonged to us. At the time, I thought the only way that could be true was if my dad had legally married 2 women. But that isn't how it worked. He didn't have 2 legal wives. He had one. My mom. About 20 minutes later, they walked the other party out the front door. And I understood the phrase, punch to the gut, in a brand new way. The woman was in her mid-40s. Blonde hair, very done. Big sunglasses even though it was dusk. She had on a white puffer coat that looked expensive until you got close enough to see the cheap stitching. Her nails were long and glossy. Her lips were overlined. Her boots had heels that were absolutely not meant for snow. She looked around like she was trying to find a camera. Like she'd rehearsed this moment in her head and expected better lighting. 2 young men followed behind her. Early 20s. Matching buzz cuts. Matching chain necklaces. Both built like they spent more time at the gym than at a job. They were smirking. Actually smirking. Like this was a show and they were the stars. The woman lifted her chin. I'm Tessa Bishop, she said. And I don't know who you people are, but you need to stop trespassing. Jenna made a sound. Not a cry. A growl. Evan stepped forward. Who are we? Who are we? Lady, this is my father's cabin. Tessa's mouth twisted. Yeah, our father. My husband. Same man. Different life. Mom stood up, slow, controlled, and in that second, she looked less like a grieving widow and more like a judge about to hand down a sentence. You're lying, Mom said. Tessa laughed, a little too loud. Ma'am, please. I have a marriage certificate. I have photos. I have receipts. Richard wasn't exactly subtle. One of the sons, the taller one, pointed at us like he was pointing at stray dogs. And your people showed up and started swinging. So maybe worry about that. My stomach flipped. Mark didn't start anything. The shorter son shrugged. He came in hot, talking crazy. We defended ourselves. Jenna snapped. He went back to get a phone. He didn't go back to get beaten half to death. Tessa made a pouty face. That's unfortunate. But he shouldn't have put his hands on my boys. Evan said, your boys. You mean the grown men who broke his jaw. And that's when the deputy stepped between us and said, that's enough. Everyone quiet. Mom didn't look away from Tessa. How long? She asked. Tessa smiled like she was proud. 12 years. 12 years. Do you understand what 12 years means? It means my father had another whole life while he was taking my mother to anniversary dinners and talking about retirement like it was a shared plan. It means he'd been lying longer than some marriages even last. I couldn't breathe for a second. Then I realized I was clenching my hands so hard my nails hurt. The trooper told us we had to leave the property for the night. Active investigation. Scene processing. Statements at the station in Bel Air. Mom said no. This is my home. The trooper said, ma'am, I'm sorry. And he sounded like he meant it. Tessa called after us as we walked to our cars. Tell your son to learn some manners. One of her boys added, yeah, and tell your old lady to stop acting like she owns the place. Evan turned around so fast I thought he might actually do something stupid. Mom grabbed his sleeve without even looking. Just a quick grip. Commanding. Evan froze. He swallowed his anger like a pill. Mom said to herself more than to us, Richard. And the way she said it wasn't grief. It was indictment. That night, we drove to the hospital. Munson Medical Center in Traverse City. Bright lights. That antiseptic smell that makes your throat close. Mark was awake when we got there. But he didn't look like Mark. His jaw was wired and swollen. His face had bruises blooming across it like dark ink in water. His right arm was in a splint. The doctor said it was broken in 2 places. They were worried about nerve damage. Mark tried to talk. He couldn't. He made a sound. It was half frustration, half pain. Jenna held his good hand, tears falling silently. She kept whispering, "I'm here. I'm here." Mom stood at the foot of the bed and stared at her firstborn like she was memorizing him. Like she didn't trust the world not to change him while she blinked. The doctor explained the jaw, the surgery, the recovery, the physical therapy, 6 to 8 weeks minimum, possibly longer. Then the doctor said, there may be some permanent limitation in his arm. We won't know until we see how it heals. Permanent limitation. For a man who builds things with his hands. That's when something in me went cold. Not sadness. Not shock. Clarity. Because a secret family is an insult. But a broken jaw and a broken arm. That's a declaration of war. The next day blurred. Police station. Fluorescent lights. Paper cups of bad coffee. A detective with tired eyes asking the same questions in 3 different ways, like if he said them slowly enough we'd confess to being in a different reality. They asked about Mark first. Did he have a temper? Did he drink? Was he looking for a fight? I wanted to laugh. Mark's idea of danger is mowing a lawn without ear protection. Mom answered every question like she was under oath. Precise. No rambling. No extra emotion to be used against her. If they asked what time we left for the hike, she gave them the minute. If they asked who locked the cabin, she told them which key and which hook on the wall it lived on. And every time the detective circled back to the same point, Mom's voice got colder. My husband is dead. He's been dead for 10 months. What he did while alive is not an excuse for what those boys did to my son yesterday. The detective said they were calling it an assault. They were interviewing the other parties. But he was honest. We have 2 sides. No independent witnesses. Remote location. Limited service. It's going to come down to statements and physical evidence. Translation. If the other family lied well enough, they might walk. If the bruises told the wrong story, they might walk. If the county prosecutor didn't want the headache, they might walk. That was my first micro lesson in how injustice survives. It doesn't need a villain twirling a mustache. It just needs doubt. And paperwork. And people too tired to push. Back at the hotel in Traverse City, none of us slept. Jenna sat by Mark's bed most of the night. Evan paced the hallway like he was trying to wear a groove into the carpet. Mom sat in a chair and stared at her hands, like she was watching her life replay in the lines of her palms. Late that afternoon, Mark could finally speak a little through the swelling. It came out thick and slow. Every word hurt. But he wanted to tell us what happened before anyone else could. He said he got back to the cabin and saw 2 strange cars in the driveway. He thought maybe we'd been robbed. He went in careful. Quiet. He called out. Then he heard laughter from the kitchen. Men's voices. A woman's voice. Like they owned the air. He walked into the kitchen and saw them. Tessa sitting at our table like she'd always belonged there. Her boys eating chips out of a bag and dropping crumbs on my dad's old wood floor. A suitcase open by the door. Like they were settling in. Mark said he asked, "Who are you?" And the tall kid, Braden, looked him up and down and said, "Who are you?" Like it was cute. Mark told them, "This is my father's cabin." He said it again slower when they laughed. That's when Tessa said the line that made my blood boil even hearing it secondhand. She said, "Sweetie, your father had a real family too." Mark said he felt his heart slam into his ribs. He pulled his phone out to call 911, then remembered he didn't have it. He asked for theirs. They refused. He asked them to leave. They refused. He told them police were coming. They said call them. And then Braden stepped toward him, too close, chest out, smiling. Mark told him to back up. Braden said, "Make me." Mark said he put one hand up. Not a punch. Not a shove. Just a stop sign. And Braden slapped his hand away and called him a name I won't repeat here. The kind that's meant to humiliate you in your own home. Mark said that's when Colt, the younger one, came around behind him like a coward. He didn't see the first hit. He just felt his jaw explode. He went down. Then he felt boots. More hits. His arm twisted the wrong way when he tried to cover his face. He said the last thing he saw before everything went fuzzy was Tessa standing there with her arms folded. Watching. Not screaming. Not stopping it. Just watching like she'd ordered a meal and it arrived. When Mark finished, Jenna put her forehead on his good hand and cried like her body finally gave up trying to be strong. Evan said, "I'm going to kill them." Mom didn't even look up. She said, "No, you're not." Then she leaned forward. "We're going to do this the right way. And they're going to feel it for years." That was the moment I realized my mother wasn't going to break. She was going to execute. On January 3rd, Mom called my dad's attorney. The same man who'd handled their wills for years. His name was Charles Weaver. Gray hair, smooth voice. Always acted like my father was a client and my mother was a side note. Mom put him on speaker so we could all hear. She said, "Charles, there's a woman named Tessa Bishop claiming she was married to my husband. There are 2 adult sons claiming they are his. My son is in the hospital with a broken jaw and a broken arm. I want to know what my husband did, and I want to know what you did to help him." There was a pause. Then Weaver did the thing lawyers do. He tried to lower the temperature with polite words. "Diane, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for what happened to Mark, but I can't discuss confidential matters." Mom said, "You can't discuss my husband's confidential matters with his wife." Another pause. Then Weaver said, "Diane, maybe we should meet in person." Mom said, "We will. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., and Charles, bring everything." At Weaver's office in Traverse City, the carpet was thick enough to swallow footsteps. The walls had framed certificates and lake photos that made it feel like a dentist's office for rich people. Tessa was there. Of course she was. Sitting in the waiting room like she'd booked the appointment. Braden and Colt flanked her, legs spread, chewing gum like it was a job requirement. Mom walked past them like they were chairs. She didn't glance. She didn't acknowledge. It was the most disrespectful thing she could have done, and it was beautiful. Weaver ushered us into a conference room. He tried to smile. "Diane, Lauren, Evan, Jenna." Mom didn't sit until Weaver sat. Then she sat. It was subtle, but it was dominance. Weaver cleared his throat. "I want to be careful here. Emotions are high." Mom said, "My son's jaw is wired shut. Don't start with emotions." Weaver's smile died. He opened a folder. Richard established several trusts. Evan leaned forward. "Several. Why several?" Weaver said, "Estate planning can be complex." Mom said, "Charles, stop, talk." Weaver slid documents across the table. I saw my father's signature in black ink. Clean. Confident. Like he wasn't signing away our reality. The first trust was dated 2018. It named my mom as primary beneficiary. It held the cabin and a chunk of investment accounts. It looked normal. Respectable. The second trust was dated 2021. Different name. Different set of assets. A rental property in Elk Rapids. A brokerage account. A life insurance policy. And beneficiaries listed as Tessa Bishop, Braden Bishop, and Colton Bishop. I felt my face go hot. So he planned this. He didn't just have an affair. He built a system. Weaver said he wanted to provide for everyone without causing conflict. Evan laughed. "Without causing conflict. My brother is in a hospital bed. That's conflict." Mom's voice stayed low. "Are you telling me my husband was legally married to another woman?" Weaver hesitated. "Richard told me he was divorced and remarried." Mom blinked once. "Told you." Weaver said, "I did not personally handle any divorce." Mom said, "Because there wasn't one." Weaver opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "Diane, I can run the records." Mom said, "Do it now." Weaver looked flustered. "It's not that simple." Mom leaned in. "It is that simple. Either I have divorce papers or I don't. And I don't." Tessa finally spoke from the doorway. She'd followed us in like a ghost with lip gloss. "Excuse me, I do. I have our marriage certificate." Mom turned her head slowly. "Sweetheart, if you were legally married to my husband, you're either his wife or his mistress with paperwork. Which one is it?" Braden snorted. "Watch your mouth." Evan snapped, "Watch yours. Your brother broke my brother's jaw." Weaver raised both hands. "Please, this is not helpful." Mom said, "Actually, it's very helpful." Because I can hear exactly who I'm dealing with. Tessa put her hand on her chest like she was auditioning for a reality show. Richard loved me. He didn't want me left with nothing. Jenna's eyes were red, but her voice was steady. And Mark. Did Richard love Mark when your sons were kicking him on the floor? Tessa shrugged. A real shrug. My boys defended themselves. Mom smiled. It wasn't warm. We'll see. After we left, Mom didn't go back to the hotel. She went home, downstate, straight to the basement. That's where she kept the Richard binder, as I called it. 30 years of paperwork in neat folders. Mortgages, deeds, bank statements, closing documents, the evidence of a life built the boring way. I went with her. Evan too. We sat on storage bins while Mom pulled folders like a librarian with a vendetta. It was just after 9 p.m. and suddenly, Mom froze. She held up a yellowed sheet of paper. Elk Rapids, she whispered. It was a closing statement from 2009. A small rental house near the water. Purchased under an LLC that Richard had set up. Mom's name was on the documents as a signer. Not a beneficiary. A signer. Like she was part owner, part responsible, part everything. Mom tapped the page with her finger. I helped buy this. I said maybe he refinanced later. Mom said he couldn't remove me without my signature. Evan leaned in. Unless he forged it. Mom looked up at us. And for the first time since the police lights, she let her anger show. If he forged my name, if he stole from our marriage to fund his little second life, then that trust isn't just immoral, it's fraud. And right there was the second major twist. Because this wasn't just about two families. It was about a man building one family on the paperwork of another. The next morning, Mom called an estate litigator in Grand Rapids. The kind of lawyer who doesn't smile in photos. Her name was Rachel Kaplan. When Rachel answered, her voice was calm and sharp, like a scalpel. Mom said, "My husband died. I found out he had a second family. My son was assaulted by their sons. And I believe my husband used marital assets to fund their trust. I want to know what I can legally take back." Rachel didn't gasp. She didn't moralize. She asked one question. "Are you sure you were ever divorced?" Mom said, "We were never divorced." Rachel said, "Then we start there. Because if he was still married to you, any later marriage is likely invalid, and that changes everything." I felt my stomach drop again. Because Dad didn't just betray Mom. He may have built Tessa's whole status on a lie. Rachel said, "Bring me your documents. Bring me the binder. Bring me everything. And don't speak to Tessa again without counsel." Evan said, "Oh, I'm going to speak to her." Mom said, "No. You're going to let Rachel speak to her." 2 weeks later, Mark came home. Jaw still healing. Arm in a hard cast. His hand weaker. Fingers slower. He tried to lift a mug and had to use his left hand. I watched him notice it. I watched him pretend he didn't. He tried to joke. "Guess I'm learning to be ambidextrous." Jenna kissed his cheek and whispered, "You're alive." But at night, I heard him in the bathroom, angry breathing. The sound a man makes when he realizes the world changed him without permission. Rachel filed 2 things fast. A civil suit for assault and damages, medical bills, lost wages, long-term impairment, and an estate action challenging the second trust based on fraud and lack of proper disclosure. Tessa posted online about it. Of course she did. She made a Facebook post with a selfie and a caption like, "Pray for my family. Haters are trying to steal what my husband left us." Braden commented, "We ain't scared." And Colt commented a string of laughing emojis like he was proud. Rachel printed screenshots. She said, "People love to write their own confession." Then Weaver called. He sounded different. Nervous. He said he couldn't find any divorce record in Michigan. No filing. No decree. Nothing. Mom said because it never happened. Weaver said, "Richard told me it happened in Florida." Rachel said, "Then we subpoena Florida. And if it doesn't exist, we notify the court that he misrepresented his marital status. That invalidates a lot." Evan said, "So she's not his wife." Rachel said, "Legally, likely not. Morally, I don't care. Legally is where we win." I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. Because Tessa didn't come quietly. She came loud. She showed up at Mom's church one Sunday, dressed like a funeral was a fashion contest. Black dress. High boots. Big sunglasses again. She waited in the lobby like she'd been invited. When Mom walked out, Tessa stepped into her path. Diane. We need to talk woman to woman. Mom didn't stop. I don't talk to strangers who call my son a trespasser. Tessa followed, voice getting sharper. Your son attacked my kids. Mom turned and said, very softly, your kids broke my son's jaw. People nearby went quiet. A few heads turned. Tessa's cheeks flushed. She hated being watched without being admired. She hissed, you can't do this to us. Richard left us that money. Mom said, Richard lied to you too. You just didn't notice because it came with gifts. That was the first time I saw something like fear flash across Tessa's face. Because deep down, she knew. If Richard had lied about the divorce, he could have lied about everything. Rachel sent a formal demand letter to Tessa's counsel. It laid out the facts, the lack of divorce decree, the marital asset claim on the Elk Rapids property, the civil damages for Mark's permanent impairment. It ended with one line that made me sit back in my chair. Rachel wrote, you are not entitled to keep what was built on misrepresentation. We will pursue full recovery. Tessa's lawyer tried bluster first. He suggested we were grieving and confused. Rachel replied with certified copies of filings and a scheduled deposition date for Tessa. Then the prosecutor's office called about the assault. They said charges might be difficult, but they were still investigating. Rachel said, that's fine. Civil court doesn't need a criminal conviction. Microhook for you right here. Because if you've ever thought bad people win because they avoid jail, I need you to understand. There are other ways to ruin someone's life. Legal ways. At deposition, Tessa tried to act sweet. She brought coffee. She used first names like we were friends. Rachel let her talk. Then Rachel asked, when did you first learn Richard Bishop was still legally married? Tessa blinked hard. He was divorced. Rachel slid a document across the table. No divorce record exists, not in Michigan, not in Florida, not anywhere. So I'll ask again, when did you learn? Tessa's voice went tight. I didn't. Rachel nodded. So you married a man who lied about being free to marry you. That would make your marriage void, which means your claim as spouse is void, which means the trust created for you may be challenged as a product of fraud. Are we clear? Tessa looked at her lawyer. He looked at the table. Then Rachel asked about the cabin. Why did you go there on January 1st? Tessa said, Richard told me it was ours too. Rachel said, did he tell you his first family would be there? Tessa paused. That pause was everything. No. Rachel asked, so you went knowing there was a risk you'd be discovered? Tessa snapped, I went because it's my husband's property. Rachel said, he wasn't your husband. That's when Tessa's mask slipped. She muttered, this is bull. One curse word. One. And it sounded like a toddler saying a big word. Not intimidating. Just revealing. Meanwhile, Mark's reality got worse. When the cast came off, his hand didn't bounce back. He could grip. But not like before. He couldn't twist a jar lid without pain. He couldn't hold a drill steady. He couldn't lift his son without wincing. His doctor wrote it plainly. Permanent limitation. Rachel added it to the damages. She called it what it was. Loss of function. Loss of earning capacity. Loss of enjoyment of life. Evan wanted revenge with fists. Mom wanted revenge with a pen. Rachel gave us both by turning their arrogance into evidence. By spring, we were in mediation. A bland office. 2 separate rooms. Lawyers as messengers. The air thick with polite hostility. Tessa demanded her share and called Mom delusional. Braden posted a photo on Instagram in a courtroom outfit he probably rented. Caption. They Trina take what's ours. Rachel said, perfect, keep posting. Then came the moment Tessa thought would save her. She brought in a binder of photos. Her with Dad on vacations. Her kids with Dad at the cabin. Dad holding a fishing rod. Dad smiling like a man with nothing to hide. Tessa's lawyer said, this shows a family. This shows intent. Rachel said, intent doesn't override fraud. Then Rachel dropped the third twist. Not for us. For Tessa. She said, we found the deed history on Elk Rapids. Diane's name is on the original acquisition. We found the refinance file. Diane's. Signature is on the guarantee. The trust used that property as collateral, which means your trust assets are commingled with marital assets. Tessa's face went white. No. Rachel said yes. Your lifestyle was funded by someone else's marriage. Tessa whispered, we'll lose our house. Rachel said, you should have thought about that before your sons broke Mark's jaw. And then Rachel offered a settlement. Brutal. Clean. We keep the cabin. We keep the Elk Rapids rental. We keep the brokerage account in that trust. Tessa keeps a smaller cash amount from a separate policy, and the boys get nothing beyond what they can prove is solely theirs. Tessa refused. Of course she did. So we went to court. In court, Mom wore a navy suit and pearls. Tessa wore a tight beige dress like she was going to brunch. Braden and Colt sat behind her with the same smirks until the judge looked at them. Then they stopped. Funny how authority works when it's real. Rachel presented the lack of divorce. The judge's eyebrows lifted. Rachel presented the asset tracing. The judge asked questions. Rachel presented medical records of Mark's injuries and the long-term limitations. Tessa's lawyer argued fairness. He talked about kids. He talked about hardship. He tried to make us look cruel. Rachel stood and said, this isn't about cruelty. This is about consequences. My client was married to Richard Bishop for 43 years. Her marital assets were used without her consent to establish a trust for a woman who is not, legally, a spouse. And the beneficiaries of that trust committed a violent assault causing permanent impairment. The court does not reward fraud. I watched the judge's face change. Not sympathy, recognition. Like he'd seen this play before. A man thinking he could split his life in half and leave the women to mop it up. The ruling came in late summer. The second trust was voided as to Tessa's spousal claims due to misrepresentation. The Elk Rapids property was declared marital and returned to Diane. The brokerage funds were ordered into the estate. Tessa was awarded a small settlement amount tied to a life insurance beneficiary designation that couldn't be easily unwound, but it was a fraction of what she demanded. And Braden and Colt. The civil suit didn't end in jail, but it ended in a judgment they'll carry for years. Wage garnishment. Liens. A number so big they finally stopped smirking. After court, Tessa approached Mom in the hallway. No sunglasses this time. Mascara slightly smudged. She looked smaller without her performance. She said, please. Diane, we're going to lose everything. Mom looked at her like she was looking through glass. You should have picked a man who didn't already belong to someone else. Tessa's voice cracked. I have kids. Mom said, so do I. Tessa whispered, they were his sons too. Mom nodded once. Then he failed them. That wasn't my job to fix. And that was it. No hook. No reconciliation. No fake forgiveness to make the story pretty. Because my brother still had wires in his jaw when he learned our father had been living a second life. Because his arm still aches when the weather turns. Because he still can't hold his kid the way he used to. New Year's at the cabin looks different now. We still go. We still make chili. We still take the photo on the porch steps. But we don't smile the same way. We tell the truth now. We say my father's name without protecting it. We say what he did. We say what it cost. And every time I pass that driveway and see the cabin lights glow against the snow, I think about how my mother handled it. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't collapse. She let the law do the damage. She let the paperwork become a weapon. And she made sure the people who hurt her son paid for it in the only language they seemed to understand. Money. Loss. Consequences. Let me give you the part nobody posts on Facebook. The quiet part after the court papers. Because winning doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath for a year. Mark did months of therapy. Twice a week at first. Then once a week. His therapist taught him how to grip again. How to strengthen what nerves would allow. How to accept the fact that some things were gone for good. One day he tried to twist the cap off a bottle of ketchup and couldn't. He stared at it like it had insulted him. Then he laughed. A sharp laugh. He said, I got taken out by Heinz. Jenna didn't laugh. She took the bottle, opened it, and slid it back to him like she was saying, I've got you. But later I saw Mark sitting alone on the porch, flexing his fingers in the cold, like he was bargaining with his own body. Evan changed too. The anger didn't leave him. It just got a direction. He got a better job. He stopped drifting. It's funny. Sometimes it takes a family disaster to force the baby of the family to finally grow up. And Mom. My mother became almost frighteningly efficient. She updated her will. She consolidated accounts. She put everything in writing. She said, "No one is going to clean up my mess." I cleaned up Richard's. The cabin became a symbol again. Not of Dad. Of Mom. Of what she built. She had the old locks replaced. She put cameras in. She kept it private. Not because she was paranoid. Because she was done trusting. Tessa moved out of the Elk Rapids house within 3 months. She had to. The court order was clear. Braden and Colt tried to act tough about it online, but their posts shifted from flexing to vague quotes about snakes and karma. And then they got real quiet. Because wage garnishments don't care about your captions. Liens don't care about your gym selfies. Reality is the one judge you can't charm. That next New Year's, we went back to Torch Lake. We stood on the porch steps in the same arrangement. Mom in the center. Mark close on her right. Evan on her left. Jenna beside Mark, holding his arm like it mattered. The kids in front, bundled up, cheeks red from the cold. I raised the camera and said, "Smile." Mom looked straight into the lens and said, "We are smiling." And she was. Just not the kind of smile Dad used to demand for photos. Not a cover-up smile. A finality smile. Because some fresh starts aren't about forgiving. They're about reclaiming. And sometimes the most American thing you can do is look at someone who tried to take your life and say, in plain language, "Not today." And if you're wondering about my father, here's the truth I landed on. He wasn't a mastermind. He was a coward with money. He thought he could buy silence. He thought trusts were a magic trick that would keep consequences in separate boxes. But secrets don't stay separate. They collide. They always do. And when they do, somebody bleeds. In our case, it was Mark. So when people ask my mother if she ever misses Richard, she answers honestly. She says, "I miss the man I thought I married. I don't miss the man he became." That's the line I carry now. Because it's the cleanest truth I've ever heard. Thanks for listening. If this story hit a nerve, like, subscribe, and share it. And if you've lived through your own version of a family secret detonating, leave a comment. I read them. I promise.